Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our nation has to offer, especially health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi. Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Hello, my name is Shantae Davies, and I'm here before you today as a survivor of decades of pain, trauma, and betrayal at the hands of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, and the people who enabled them, and a government that for far too long refused to help.
Oh my God, that sounds so terrible. That sounds so absolutely terrible. Carlos, play the next clip if you don't mind. I mean, the horror, the story that she tells, it is so beyond.
First, I was an excited young woman on top of the world. Epstein flew me to his private island. He listened to my dreams, promised to help, but his promises came with a catch. The abuse began. He told me to keep it secret. He manipulated me with quid pro quo I did not consent to, but I felt I had no one to turn to. He was too powerful.
Doesn't sound at all like she's reading from a script, does it? All right. Now, what is omitted from this is the fact that she was an adult woman at the time of the alleged abuse, and she told a totally different story 10 years ago. But minor details, right? Minor details. It's too much fun to have a hysterical witch hunt. And this stuff is a witch hunt. I think President Trump is right. This stuff is a hoax, a lot of it. Michael Tracy is an unbelievable, just in the best way, incredible, just an amazing independent journalist. And he has been a truth teller on this and so many other issues. He's got a great Substack, and Substack is really where it's at these days, mtracy.net. Michael, welcome back. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm all right. To be honest, I'm getting, you get light years more than I get, but I started, shooting my mouth off about the Epstein stuff, what I know, what I've learned from you, and oh boy, people do not like hearing facts, do they?
No, there's a whole mythology or even ideology that's been built up around this thing, and it is sort of strangely cross-ideological, so it's sort of a distinct issue in that respect. I mean, you can't easily peg it to one or the other partisan poles. Obviously, there is a partisan dimension just in that Trump, as you mentioned, has called it a hoax, or he's been rather dismissive of it, and clearly Democrats have operationalize this issue as like the main opposing narrative to Trump in the second administration. It's sort of the analog of what the Mueller investigation or the Russian collusion stuff was in the first administration. But in terms of the online kind of fever swamps around this, it is quite amazing. What I always am sort of staggered by is that for one reason or another, people seem incredibly invested in the idea that there really is a ton more systematic, vicious child sex abuse than there actually appears to be. Not that child sex abuse doesn't occur, obviously, but predominantly where it does occur, it's much more run-of-the-mill. It's not some globe-spanning, elite-controlled, covered-up, blackmail-directed kind of sprawling operation that people have theorized, and they've turned it almost into a dogma that for a lot of them can never be falsified, because what do they say? Oh, just because the current batch of Epstein files, quote unquote, don't contain the evidence that we always imagined it to contain, that just means that the cover-up continues, right? So that means it's never going to be falsifiable. But at the same time, though, I mean, I have found that, when you sort of can sit down with somebody or explain things rationally, I have heard from quite a few people who have told me that I've, definitely shifted their perspective to some extent, because a lot of the stuff that people absorb is just kind of folklore. It's like from Netflix. It's just kind of like from the social media churn. They've never really done a deep forensic dive on the source material, which is really necessary on lots of issues, but this one in particular, because otherwise you're just kind of like ingesting these totally faulty characterizations of things that are slanted toward the most incendiary possible depictions.
So I know why people are so invested in the idea of a global child pedophile ring. You want to hear why they're invested?
Sure. Hit me.
Well, the idea that there is that kind of grievous sin happening makes people feel better about the sin in their own lives. For instance, if I'm having an affair, right, and I'm married, I mean, okay, well, but I'm not molesting kids, right? I mean, it makes people feel morally secure in whatever corners they're cutting. That's reprehensible. I actually know this in a weird way, not that I had an affair, but I saw that movie. What's that name of the movie? The Sound of Freedom. Did you see that?
I know of it. I didn't get a chance to see it. Well, that's all about trafficking, guys who, track down children who were trafficking victims or something like that, right?
Right. And it was very powerful. And I came out of that movie like, oh my God, we got to stop this. And I was beating myself up about a very minor moral quandary I had about something so minor and ridiculous. And I thought to myself, why was I even worried about that? These people are monsters. And it was like an aha moment. I'm like, oh, wow. Anyway, look.
That Sound of Freedom movie, though, I have to say, is a little bit questionable. I've looked into, I think his name is Ballard or something like that, if I'm remembering right. He's sort of the leader of whatever that movement is. I don't know. These guys who proclaim themselves to be professional child sex trafficking saviors, and then they have to like concoct some weird scenario that they then dramatize and, get it ready for the big screen. There's always a little bit something odd going on with that. And it has like some strange sort of religious overtones that are kind of weirdly apocalyptic and paranoid. So anyway.
Well, there's this thing, Somali Mom. You ever heard of Somali Mom? Yeah, it was a woman, Cambodian, and she ran around New York City talking about how she was a survivor of sex trafficking, and this is about 15 years ago, and it turned out to be a total fraud. She was raising money. She had event after event, and it was like, oh wow, Somali Mom, so interesting. And nope, it was all a scam.
Yeah, so that Sound of Freedom guy, I read, he had some litigation going from former employees, and eventually it came out in that litigation that he claims that some Mormon prophet transmits to him the locations of these human trafficking victims, and that's how he knows where they are. I mean, come on, give me a break.
Well, then again, look, I cut them some slack too because I haven't gone deep, and you know how these reports can be skewed. You know what I mean? Sure. Once you know something about something, you realize how very little people know anything about anything. Yeah.
Let's just say I'm instinctively skeptical. We'll leave it at that.
Understood. So, Andrew is, you see that picture there, and he's in big trouble, it looks like. But you are, and it has nothing to do with sex. It has to do with Epstein and trade documents and secrets. But you believe, and I think I concur, that this is just a spin-off because they hate Epstein. They hate Andrew over there because of his association with Epstein. That's my sense. Can you put this in context for me and what's really going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a total fallacy to say, oh, this is just about some unremarkable little email excerpt that somebody found in this Epstein files archive, and it could potentially suggest some kind of untoward transmittal of trade information. I mean, that would be so run of the mill that there's zero chance that, absent the connection to the man who is like taken on this almost like metaphysical world historic villain status, Jeffrey Epstein, there's no way that, barring Andrew's connection to this individual who the entire British media and American media and like world media are declaring every 2 seconds is the most notorious pedophile in human history, barring that, of course, nobody would ever think twice about these formulaic emails. And much less that it would somehow warrant the first arrest criminally of a British royal since like the 17th century. That's crazy. Of course, it's basically fitting some facts to the crime, right? Or like retrofitting a set of facts to impose some kind of punishment, or as like the survivors love to say, quote, accountability on Andrew that, given his association with Epstein. Nobody cares in the abstract about him passing along some trade information. That's not why this is a mass hysteria.
Sure. Hey, can I jump in? Let me ask you this about just overall. And you have documented, and and anybody can know if they look. We're not saying Jeffrey Epstein is a great guy or innocent of everything. He's done some things, but do me a favor. Nobody really understands what he's actually guilty of. Going back to 2008, can you explain that for everybody? Because there is, there's a myth and then there's reality.
Sure. I will never not be amazed at the following fact, and I swear this is true. For all the mammoth journalistic resources that have been poured into the story over the past, 10, 15 years, a long time now. Netflix, Hulu, New York Times, BBC, podcasts, you name it. Social media, investigators, freelancers. Apparently, I'm the only guy who ever thought it might be a good idea to look at the Florida court docket and check what Jeffrey Epstein actually pleaded guilty to. Like, you can go, there's a transcript of the plea hearing where he enters his guilty plea in Florida, and they spell out what the charges are, who the purported victims are, and, it's on the record, but I've never seen, it's never been reported anywhere. Like, what are people focusing on, if not this? They're focused on all this tangential stuff and this intrigue and, mythological speculation and an intelligence service and a pedo ring. I mean, all this nonsense when we could get down to brass tacks and just understand the parameters of the case legally a little bit better, but nobody ever thought to do it, I guess, until I did, just a few months ago, which, again, just strikes me as astonishing. But, if you go and check that transcript of the plea hearing, because this was pursuant to his federal non-prosecution agreement, right? The feds interceded. Acosta, who was Trump's first labor secretary, he was the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida. He intercedes after the Palm Beach police are complaining that they're not satisfied with the way that the state attorneys have sought to resolve the state-level prosecution, right? So the feds intercede. One thing leads to another, convoluted legal story, but eventually a non-prosecution agreement is brokered that requires Epstein to plead guilty to 2 state-level prostitution charges in Florida. Now, that they were prostitution charges is already interesting because nowadays it's very unlikely that a similar scenario, right, would result in anything that would be labeled a prostitution charge, because that's seen as like an antiquated term now. It's seen as too derogatory toward the woman or the victim to be labeled a prostitute in any way. So anything that would have been considered commonly to be prostitution in even as recently as the mid to late 2000s is now almost like presumptively construed as, quote, trafficking. But
well,
anyway,
it was pretty solicitation of a minor for prostitution, right? Isn't that it?
The exact wording of the statute is procuring person under 18 for prostitution. And then there was a felony solicitation of prostitution charge that was that was broader. It wasn't specific to any particular victim.
All right, which is bad. Let's face it, that's bad.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's a prostitution charge. But my point is always that things need to be kept in proper proportion, and they have to be rationally understood before we make crazy, wild extrapolations, right? So the second charge that was added on at the behest of the feds was this procuring person under 18 for prostitution, right? And that referred to, because it's procuring person, so singular, right? So the person who was cited as the sole minor whom Epstein was ever convicted or adjudicated for procuring for prostitution was a girl who you can find her interviews, you can find her the transcripts of her grand jury testimony. A lot of the stuff came out pretty recently, actually in 2024, because DeSantis in Florida signed a bill that allowed for grand jury material to be released and other materials. And No, a lot of these quote unquote victims or survivors are, let's say questionable, or they have an easily discernible financial incentive to embellish or dramatize, et cetera, especially like years after the fact. But that's not the case for this girl, actually. She's unusual in that she strikes me as like 100% credible, well-adjusted, not like at all sort of unhinged or trying to dramatize things. And she, I think, credibly has testified that, Epstein did have sexual intercourse with her, she said, one day before her 18th birthday. Prior to that, she had come like 15 times or so, and it was like gradually escalating sexual contact. It wasn't always fully sexualized, but, things escalated. But she said it was always consensual. She said he never forced her to do anything, etc. Now, people can object to that. Fine. And it is statutorily illegal in Florida because Florida has the highest age of consent in the country, which is 18. Now, you can object to that. You can support that. I'm not even really weighing in. I'm like normatively on what the age of consent could be. I'm not particularly invested in that subject. I'm just saying that, for all that we've been told about the magnitude of like the pedophilic crimes here, or like this mass sort of child rape ring that people love to, opine about so confidently, I don't know. The fact pattern just does not match what the actual facts are. Now, there are other allegations against Epstein. There's other stuff that's been swirling in civil litigation and criminal procedures as well. But in terms of like what he was actually convicted of and what is like on the record, that's it. And I just don't think that's been made at all clear to most people who have been following the story.
Very quickly, you are, very much so have been a lone voice, although there are others kind of catching on. Michael Tracy, tell us a little bit about you. Where do you come from? How is it that, you're in this position, which is fantastic? I mean, I love it. I know, and people have been questioning, oh my gosh, who's he paid for? Who's he paid by? We saw that with Piers Morgan. I think you handled it very, very well, both in the moment and online. So just tell us a little bit about, where you come from, where you went to school, and how you got into this kind of work, and how is it that you're so, interestingly independent and unmoved by mobs?
Well, first of all, I wish I was secretly paid by one of these, wealthy, Epstein co-conspirators or something. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I know that's what people assume, but no, of course I'm not paid by anybody to do this. I mean, it actually is just a product of my own just genuine inquiry that I've been doing on my own volition, for better or worse, and then I have just a readership or a following that pays me by and large. So that's it. I'm from New Jersey. Nothing really special. An issue comes along, I find, I guess, every couple of years, where if one is able to delve into the source materials, then your perspective is just radically different than how stuff gets characterized secondhand. So, I'm thinking of like almost the Robert Mueller thing or the Trump-Russia collusion narrative as an example of this, because I was very early on to that as a skeptic. Just because everything that I was seeing in kind of like the evidentiary record did not at all align with some of these grandiose theories that were being kind of, implicated around some kind of collusion thesis. And with the Epstein story, it's funny because, I had intermittently followed it over the years, but when the uproar really broke out over the summer after the FBI and DOJ put out that memo, which really was a dopey memo. I mean, it was like a self-inflicted wound in some ways. But that's when I thought to myself, okay, like I had already had some skeptical intuitions. Like I knew about some of the main claims that were sort of like associated with the story, like this Virginia Roberts Gouffre person who had been essentially discredited and yet didn't seem to like penetrate the popular awareness at all, that like a main plank of the mythology had been.
Listen, Michael, forgive me, man. I'm up against the clock. Okay, sure. We could go on for hours, and some of your podcasts do go on for hours, and they are so fascinating. No, it's because it's so rich. I really encourage people to go to mtracy.net, Tracy, Tracey, mtracy.net, and you can sign up for the Substack. You start reading this stuff, you're going to be better informed than basically almost anybody in the fake news. It's really incredible stuff. Michael Tracy, I think you're doing a public service. I know it's hard, but I applaud you for it. Thank you.
I find it invigorating, believe it or not. So
good for you.
It's all good.
Good for you. Michael Tracy, everybody, and we'll be right back.
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.